Hi, I'm Alan Hills, and welcome to the College of St. Rose's movie review and discussion podcast, Cutting to the Chase, brought to you by the Campus Radio Club, Radio St. Rose. You know, one of the best parts about reviewing and discussing movies through modern technological media is the ability to discuss honorable classics and to remind everyone of why they're important. Therefore, this will be the first episode of Cutting to the Chase to be completely taken in that direction, as the 1989 Civil War epic Glory will be the overall focus. This Oscar-winning combat epic, which will be turning 30 next year, tells the inspirational true story of the 54th Regiment, the Union Army's first group of African-American soldiers, in triumphant fashion. With both historical significance and visionary spectacle, Glory is a war film for the ages. Unlike most combat films over the past 100 years, Glory is a film that truly recognizes the importance of its depicted history without wasting any time on meaningless fluff. Every second of the movie is emotionally relevant and entertaining. One of the reasons why its drama works so well is because of its star-studded ensemble cast. Matthew Broderick gives an incredibly inspiring portrayal of the colonel who led these soldiers into battle, while the legendary Cary Elwes provides his usual charm to the character of his friend, a major, who assisted him in the process. Even more legendary, however, is the Oscar-winning performance of Denzel Washington that completely steals the show. Morgan Freeman and Andre Braugher also provide the same kind of talent that really makes it difficult for the viewer to decide who gives the most gripping performance. Thanks to this positive overload of great actors, Glory is nothing short of gripping when it comes to its characters. Aside from all of that, something about the film's visual style and aesthetic is cinematically beautiful. The Oscar-winning cinematography, along with Edward Zwick's direction, somehow makes the spectacle of the history depicted very glamorous and artistically noteworthy. Most history films, most I've seen anyway, tend to have unpleasingly bland aesthetics, since the only focus is usually to tell a significant story without presenting a unique depiction of a reality as it once was. Most history films tend to have unpleasingly bland aesthetics, since the only focus is usually to tell a significant story without presenting a unique depiction of a reality as it once was. The makers of Glory somehow managed to completely suck the viewer in through its astounding visuals and overall clear details. It just goes to show how much they really cared about the historical importance of these events. This is one of those rare movies where you can tell that so much effort was put into it. So if you haven't seen Glory at all, or just haven't seen it in a while, then please take a moment out of your time to watch it, since it does live up to its title. Now let's move on to one of our special guests for this episode, who is a communications professor here at St. Rose. She teaches many subjects here, including documentary film and TV, communication law, advertising copywriting, and combat films, in which I watched Glory for the first time in a few years. She is Professor Mary Alice Smolgard. Professor, thank you so much for coming on. It's so great to have you.
Well, thank you for asking me, Alan.
You're so welcome. This is the first time that I'm actually interviewing a comm faculty member on any of my shows. It's really exciting. So yeah, we just watched Glory in combat films a few weeks ago, and you were talking about how, even though it does have some inaccuracies, just like any other history film, that, critics do consider it to be the best Civil War film. What do you think about that?
Well, I think they're right. It has an engaging cast. That's one of the things that I think makes the film very successful. Who better than Denzel Washington? All right. And Matthew Broderick is pretty good in his role, too. But all of the characters seem to be able to be relatable to the audience. And I think that the mix, the way they all worked together in this film was particularly effective. Right? It's a Civil War film, right? The subject matter is not something that you would expect contemporary audiences to be particularly thrilled about.
Right.
There's no car crashes, nothing. Things explode, but it's not somebody blowing up a building. All right, it is warfare, and so this is a subject that maybe audiences don't really know as much about. But here they're able to really tell you a story, and to tell you a very human story at the same time as giving you a history lesson.
Especially, yeah. Yeah, no, you're right about that. It is a very human story, and it is very inspiring in that case. And, you're saying like most war films in the past might not pertain to a lot of audiences because, they don't have the generic stuff like car chases, explosion. And, the thing is with Glory, they tend to, make that better than most films somehow. If you notice the end battle scene there, I mean, something about that is, just amazing. I want to say, the color of the explosions and the way everything is filmed, and especially that musical score. It's a rare kind of spectacle that they give in this movie, and after 30 years, I really can't compare it to anything else. It's really something.
It holds up really well. Now, this last scene that you were talking about, the final battle scene, is spectacular. Part of it is shot daytime. The soldiers are on the beach. They're advancing towards the fort, which is their goal. The object is to take the fort. All right. So the Union soldiers are advancing, and it's rather a beautiful setting. The beach, the sand.
I know, yeah.
The waves breaking on the shore, beautiful sky.
Yeah.
And then all goes to hell. All right, essentially.
Yeah.
Once nighttime falls, then the battle is intensified, and you mentioned the colors. The colors of the explosions
I know,
against the sky is pretty spectacular. And, that I think the visual makes that scene very impactful.
Yeah, it was definitely worthy of that Oscar for Best Cinematography. And what's also interesting is that, before we watched Glory, we started with the American Revolution, and, we watched two movies to compare, the old and the new. When we got to the Civil War, though, we started with Gone with the Wind, which, even though that's about the Civil War, it has its obvious differences. And so what are your opinions on that difference, and what do you prefer over the other in terms of like context and historical relevancy?
Well, they're at two extremes. Gone with the Wind is the traditional Moonlight and Magnolias story about the lost cause of the Confederacy. Now, I used the film for the first time in a couple of decades. I hadn't shown the film for a long time in any of my classes, but it's an important historic film from the film history standpoint.
Yeah.
It is a significant film in the canon. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And even though it has some scenes in it that I think are truly objectionable, the portrayal of the African American house servants, house slaves, is really hard to watch.
Mm-hmm. Especially.
And then we take a look at Glory, and the storyline, the basic storyline for your listeners who don't necessarily know much about the film, is that this is about one of the very first African American military units formed in the Civil War and their engagement in battle. It was a very rare occurrence, and they were given what I guess the honor as the character, Matthew Broderick's character, asks for the unit to be sent into battle. So this is something they were proving themselves as soldiers and as men and as free men. So this was important as part of the message to be conveyed to the audience.
Yeah, no, it definitely was important. I'm glad we watched Glory because, like I said earlier in the podcast where I was getting my review portion done, it was the first time I had watched it in like a few years. I had seen it a couple times before that, but I was like too young to remember. So it was really good to watch it again. And yeah, I believe that the cast really are responsible for making the film captivating. Their acting is just so incredible. Who do you think really is the best in this movie? It's so hard to decide. Everybody's so good. Who do you think's like the most effective, and why? Who do you think's like?
Well, I get, this is really a tough decision to make because Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Andre Braugher, three of the most significant actors of our time,
yes,
whether African American or not, they are very, very good actors.
Yeah.
Right? And so for me to pick, that's a little tough. I think I like Andre Braugher better than maybe a little bit better than the other two in this particular role. I'd seen Brower in a number of different dramatic pieces, a lot of television back in the mid-'90s.
Right.
And I got to like him as a performer. And I think his character in this particular film is, I think, different. And
Yeah.
they call him Snowflake. Denzel Washington refers to him as Snowflake.
Only he would.
And that was a demeaning
Yes.
term. And he was not a field hand. He wasn't a slave. He was a freedman, and he was educated. He was born free.
Yeah.
And so the two characters are absolutely opposite to each other. And I think I just enjoyed Brower's performance just a little bit better.
Yeah, I know Brower's excellent. And I also said this earlier in the episode during my review portion, and certainly not to get repetitive, I'm not talking about the final battle scene again, but something about, the direction and the cinematography makes the history look very appealing. And, most history films that I've watched, they do have bland aesthetics, and they fail to, draw audiences in without making an era that once existed, look beautiful. I mean, wouldn't you say that they do a great job at that?
Mm-hmm. I think they did, and I think they made you care a great deal about what happened to these men. You wanted them all to live, even though maybe in the back of your mind you knew that they were going to die.
Right.
And the cinematography leads you to this high point at the peak of the battle when you think that maybe they're going to succeed.
I know.
There's just that little glimmer of hope when they get physically to the top of the fort, and you think that they're going to go up over the wall and all is going to be well.
I know.
And they come over the top right into the mouth of a row of cannons, and it's just slaughter from that point on.
I know.
But you have that high moment when you think maybe something is going to come out good.
I know, yeah, you're so right about that. And the music is so fitting for all those dramatic scenes too. I forgot who did it, but they had a Harlem choir do some of that. I thought that was pretty astounding.
The Harlem Boys Choir,
yes, right,
does the vocalization, and the music is by James Horner.
Oh, James Horner.
I had to look though. I didn't remember right off the top of
my
head.
I didn't either, and that's usually something I remember because I like music a lot. Yeah.
Well, and it also has some similarity to John Williams.
Oh yeah.
Who audiences really do respond quite well to. He's sort of the dean of film scores, and especially dramatic and emotional films.
Yeah.
So Horner is different but similar at the same time.
Yeah, no, he really is. Glory will be having its 30th next year, which is why I decided to title this review, a 30th anniversary review, even though it hasn't come yet. But, even still, I think after 30 years, it's still effective, and I think it still has the power to inspire future generations on how important this history is. I mean, when you think maybe in the next 30 years it could still be just as powerful?
Well, I think so. Certain films reach audiences no matter when they were made. It's not a war picture, but I always talk about The Godfather.
Yes.
Which was made in 1972. All right. That's 20 years before most of your audience was born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even, when I look at the film each time, there are some parts of it that are a little worn in terms of the way the story's told, the plot, and so on. But it holds up miraculously well. And I think that there are certain films that will always be that way. It doesn't matter if you're watching them in 2018 or you watch them for the first time in 1972. Yeah.
Right.
I remember seeing The Godfather for the first time. Actually, I probably didn't see it in 72. It was maybe a year or so later. But, it was a great, impressive film for me. And I've seen it 100 times, literally 100 times since then. And every time I watch it, I see something different. I can give you a good example. About 2 years ago, I used it in class, and I never had paid attention to the bar scene that closely. In the bar scene where a murder is about to take place.
Right.
And there are glass doors, etched glass doors. In the opening of the scene, characters walk through.
Yeah.
I never noticed the carved fishes.
I didn't notice that either. Is this where Luca Brasi's killed?
This is where
Yeah,
Luca
I figured it
Brasi
was. I'm just making
is
sure I'm
killed.
right. Carved fishes in the door. Wow, that.
And then the line later on is that Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
Yeah.
All right. So I was sitting, either in the classroom or maybe I was, previewing it on my computer, and I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, fishes. At
Yeah.
the beginning of the scene, and then a little bit later on in the film, the end of the cycle. So
Yeah.
they were making the thematic connection, and however many times I'd watched the film, I never noticed it.
Yeah, I know. It's sometimes you have to watch a movie a few times to notice those parts where the filmmakers really try to speak with cinematic language and they really capture that. And I definitely think Glory has the power to speak to future audiences in that way. So,
what do you think? Turn the tables here a little bit, Alan. Why do you like the film?
well, I love the film because it is overall inspiring. The story is great. That the soldiers were given that chance to be more than everyone thought they were. It wasn't an easy time for them, and I'm just glad that they all had their moment and they really made it count. You love the characters and the acting is great, and they really recognize the significance. And as a director and as an artist in general, it is important to understand your message and to give it your all, and not to be there just to get popular and to make money. So Edward Zwick and everybody else, they put so much heart into it, and I'm glad I got to watch it again because it's so inspiring in that way.
Well, good. You got one more off your bucket list, right?
Yeah, I guess I do. And now let's move on to our other special guest for this episode, who is the one who requested that we discuss this film, and I'm glad she did. She's a communications major here at St. Rose with a double concentration in film and new media and public relations. She's a member of the campus production club, St. Rose Television, where she reports the weather for nightly news and plays a new character in the upcoming second season of the club's soap opera parody, Grades of Our Lives. She's also a co-arts editor for the campus newspaper, the St. Rose Chronicle, and she's just been accepted to the Disney College program at Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, where she'll be pursuing an internship in photography. Last but certainly not least, her hero is St. Rose's most famous alumni, Jimmy Fallon. All of you listeners, get your kazoos out because she is Lauren Kazuba. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Thanks
You're
for
welcome.
a great introduction.
Oh,
too.
you're welcome. You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it. I love it.
So we just watched Glory in our combat films class, and you were talking to me about how much you like that film and how great it would be to discuss it. What did you find most significant about the movie? What did you mostly like about it?
I think in general, so it's kind of funny. I suggested it because when I signed up for combat films, I was never really a combat films fan, just because I didn't watch a lot of combat films. My dad was more into combat films, so he kind of suggested that I sign up for it. And I kind of wanted to talk about something that I usually don't, a genre I usually don't watch in a sense. So I would say that's probably the most significant thing in general, is I wanted to discuss something that I usually don't discuss. So
I know, yeah. For me, it was the complete opposite. When I was a little kid, I'd watch all the World War II films that my dad liked, The Longest Day, The Great Escape, and I love Sands of Iwo Jima. I watch the movie religiously. I almost know every line. I could probably recite it from beginning to end. So, but yeah, that's such a great point you made on how you hadn't previously watched it before, but you're just getting familiar with it now.
Yeah, I was very impressed so far in combat films as a whole. I've been really liking that class.
I know it's
whole.
great.
Yeah.
We're watching some good stuff.
So.
Yeah, Professor Mulgard and I were talking about it earlier on how powerful the cast is, and the other day you were telling me how great Matthew Broderick is. I mean, who do you think really is the most powerful in this movie? Do you think they all are? Who do you think is the best contributor?
I would probably have to say Matthew Broderick's character. I never remember character names, but I would have
Robert
to say
Shaw.
that. Robert Shaw.
Yeah. Okay, best actor,
Yes.
not best character.
Yes. It was. I should say in the beginning, I recognized him when we were watching the movie.
Right.
And I couldn't tell who he was, and after we watched the movie, I looked it up and I said, "Oh, that's Ferris Bueller." And I was
Right.
But I don't think that he does a lot of roles like that. I don't
No,
think
he really
plays a lot of
doesn't.
characters
Yeah.
like that. So I thought it was very interesting to see him in that role, and I thought he did fantastic. I thought he was absolutely fantastic.
He really was. He should do more powerful roles like that. I don't know why he doesn't. He's proven that he can do it, but he does these little things. I don't think he's even done anything the past few years. I don't even know where he is right now.
I don't know.
I think I heard that he does theater, but I'm not exactly sure though. But yeah, and also I was talking with Professor Mulgard about this, that wouldn't you agree that Glory is presented way more beautifully than most history films? A lot of them tend to have, bland aesthetics, and they look very boring, and, the filmmakers and producers don't really care about, presenting a nice picture of a reality as it once was and, remind them of the significance. I mean, wouldn't you say that that's a huge part of it?
I would say it's a huge part of it. I was going to mention in the beginning, in high school, I took a course called Modern European History through Film.
Wow.
It was a very interesting course. We watched All Quiet on the Western Front, movies like that. I don't want to say the movies weren't powerful, because the movies were powerful, but we never watched movies that, like, I guess you could say like Glory in a sense, because it definitely, when I saw Glory and we were done watching that film, wow, I was blown away.
Yeah.
I was blown away. So
I know. Even I was blown away too, because it was good to be reminded of, why it's important.
Right.
The movie will be turning 30 next year.
Really?
And I think it's a significant anniversary, and I think it still has the power to still be effective in coming years. I mean, you think so, right?
Yeah, I think so. I keep hearing from people that it's still playing on TV a lot.
I'm sure it is.
I've never seen it on TV, but
Yeah,
I don't know.
But yeah, I'm still so glad we watched Glory. It's fantastic. And wouldn't you agree that the battle scenes are way more enticing than most? I mean, even like the final battle scene, as terrible as it was like really vibrant and colorful, and the choir music was really helping with everything.
I saw a lot of battle scenes in that high school course, and I want to say Glory is probably one of the best battle scenes that I've ever viewed.
Yeah.
One of the best.
Too.
I'm not saying the best, but one of the best. So.
Well, I think it's realistic. We did talk about this a bit in class, but some of the films, particularly the older movies, have far less graphic violence in them. And your demographic is much more used to the violence. And while it may unsettle you a bit, it doesn't turn you off like an older audience a few years back would have been. Far more unsettled by what is depicted in Glory. And the same thing with The Patriot. Now, The Patriot has some pretty spectacular, dismemberment scenes.
Yeah.
And, a cannonball comes in Glory and takes a soldier's head off. We see body parts flying all over the place. And you certainly would not have been permitted by the studios and by the Hayes office in the earlier days of filmmaking. It just simply would not have been permitted.
No.
And so you're more, in a sense, desensitized a little bit. That's why your demographic also likes horror films.
Yeah.
I can't even look at the ads for horror films. I have a terrible time with them.
Me neither. Yeah, I don't like horror films.
I don't like
it's
them.
not something, but you're the rarity. If we were to survey the people walking around out here in the hallway, they go, "Oh yeah, I love Saw, and I love Hostel, and
thank you.
I'm just, this is not my thing at all."
Right.
And even when I watch some of the war pictures, there are a few that are particularly brutal. And we will get to this eventually, but we'll be looking at Saving Private Ryan. And the whole opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan is especially acknowledged and known for that scene in which the combat violence, the war violence itself, is especially brutal. Right. And people, the first time I saw the film, I was exhausted after having watched that first half hour or so. And it just wrings something out of you. Black Hawk Down, even more contemporary film, also has that same effect on audiences.
I know you mentioned the other day when we were watching All Quiet on the Western Front, with the scene of the dismemberment of the hands, you said that was very controversial.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Oh my God, I was like, are we in the right decade here? Is this a spoof that I'm unaware of? Did I just see that?
Yeah, it's a powerful scene, and it was highly controversial at the time. Yeah. It was not expected. And you really, as you're watching the film, even now, in this decade, you really don't expect that to occur.
I did not expect it.
You know, you're seeing dirt fly up, and you're seeing, you know, lots of bombs and explosions. But
Yeah.
that was a very, very powerful moment. But it completely told that element of the story.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, it really did. And speaking of, I did see both Saving Private Ryan and Black Hawk Down, but again, I saw it a few years ago like I did Glory. So yeah, I really can't wait to watch those again. It's really going to be fun. But overall, Glory was such a fun time, all of us watching that, you know, and I think it's, you know, really going to be great. Do you have any final thoughts on that movie, Lauren? Like, what do you feel is most special about Glory, like for you personally?
I would say for me, probably, like I've said, I haven't seen a lot of combat films.
Right.
But the ones we've seen so far, I've really enjoyed. But I think just because it's so realistic, and just being able to, I don't know. There's just something special about it that I really think they did it right. I'll say that they did everything right. I think.
Yeah, and that perfectly sums it up.
Yeah,
you know, it's a history film.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That sums it up perfectly. It's a history film done right, and I'm so glad we all got to watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. This was super fun, and I hope to do it again sometime.
thank
It was
you so
really, really great. You're welcome.
Enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it so much. You're welcome. Once again, I'm Alan Hills, and this has been Cutting to the Chase. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week.